What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got yet another awesome knife review slash knife overview to do with you guys. This is the Zero Tolerance 0620. I think pretty much the entire knife world is familiar with this knife, except for me. I had not handled this knife up until this point. This is another one of my buddy Jake's knives. You can check him out on Instagram at Jake's Knives. He generously offered this and many other knives loaned them to me so that I could take a look and review them. And it was an opportunity for me to take a look at a bunch of models that I just never got the chance to look at. And I am sad to say that the 0620, as much of a ZT fan as I am, was a model that I never took a look at. So anyways, this is the original version with G10 and the DLC coated LMAX blade. There is, of course, a version of this knife just like this, but with a satin coated blade. Then, kind of like the 0562 model, there's an upgraded version with carbon fiber. And I think the final run was 204P steel, but was it like the original 0562 where the original upgraded version of this was an M390? I feel like it was, but I could be wrong. Then there's also the 0630, which is this knife in a drop point blade. That's probably the one I would have gone for. I'm not 100%. I'm not like super into Tantos. It makes sense on this knife, but that's probably what I would have gone with. But in any case, this is a very interesting knife, and I have a lot to say about it. Let's go ahead and get some measurements here real quick. Overall length of the 0620 is going to be 8.5 inches. This is a big knife. From tip to scale, we're looking at about 3.6 inches, and the actual usable cutting edge is about 3.5 inches on the dot. Let's do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. You can see there, they're almost exactly the same length. Rat 1 coming in a little tiny bit bigger at 8.6 inches overall. Up against the Spyderco PM2. PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, how about the Spyderco Delica? Spyderco Delica coming in at 7 inches overall. So yeah, big knife. It's also a very thick knife. This knife runs on, let me see if I can get in there. On phosphor bronze washers, which is really cool. Now, I'll tell you this, Jake, when I got this out of the box, my brain was not thinking, I wonder what it's running on. I just went to fire it, and then, subconsciously I was like, oh, bearings. It's incredibly smooth. Then later, way later, I happened to look in there and I was like, oh my gosh, this is on phosphor bronze washers. Listen, guys, this is the first time that I have felt an action so smooth that I was convinced that it was bearings over phosphor bronze. Now, I did not follow this model as closely as I followed some of other ZT's other models, and this was around the time where ZT was like transitioning everything into bearings. So I just assumed that it was on bearings, but this knife clearly has been used, as Jake has informed me. All of the knives he lent me have been used a little bit. This one appears to be used a little more thoroughly than some of the others. Maybe the edge has been resharpened, but what that tells me is this has had time to break in. And when ZT knives break in, they get crazy smooth, whether they're on bearings or phosphor bronze washers. And this thing is just unbelievably smooth for being a phosphor bronze washer knife. It's glassy. That detent ball has had a chance to really wear its track into this blade, and it has just broken in beautifully with perfect centering, maintaining nice early solid lockup. We'll talk about that. And the detent is just awesome. So, Jake, seriously, this is the smoothest ZT I have ever felt. That's really, really cool. So let's go ahead and get the weight on this guy, because that is definitely a factor. Oh, 6.35 ounces. Now that's my kind of knife. I like that. That weighs almost exactly as much as my full tie SM18s, but I like that heft. I like that solidity. Now, for most of you though, that's going to be kind of a deal breaker. I talk about this in every video. Most people like to keep it under 4 ounces. A lot of people are still okay at 5 ounces, but man, we get over 6 and we really start losing people. So this is a big knife. This is not a office carry knife. It's not a knife wearing your khaki shorts to church or whatever. Not that kind of knife. This is a big, heavy-duty outdoor folding knife. Definitely. But that does not mean that it's not a good knife. Knives are used in lots of different situations by lots of different people. So anyways, just wanted to point that out there. Let's go over blade shape and materials. Again, this is Elmax steel in the shape of a very aggressive Tanto. Nice DLC coating. You can see there those scratches. I always talk about this on really hard DLC. Scratches on DLC are not likely scratching through that coating. It's likely whatever rubbed up against it being pulverized against the hardness of that coating. Those coatings tend to run like 80 Rockwell, and given that like 62, really anything over 60 is considered really hard on a steel. So if you can imagine 80 Rockwell, pretty hard. That stuff is obviously not going to wear off easily. This has a thumb disc opener, as is the case with a lot of Emerson designs. If I have not mentioned that, this is an Emerson design. Most people know that. It's usually apparent by this wave feature right here. We'll talk about that. This is, of course, a USA-made knife. Elmax steel. You don't see a lot in Elmax anymore. I don't know why. Elmax is like... What's the best way, I think? Elmax is a stainless steel. You saw it a lot in ZT, saw it a lot in Microtech, and we see it in some form. I think some Italian manufacturers use it or used it more. So higher toughness and higher edge retention, I think, than S35VN. I'm using S35VN because I think the composition of S35VN is comparable. I don't want to say close. I want to say comparable. I think Elmax is less stainless than S35, but a little higher toughness and a little higher edge retention. It's right in the same ballpark, which is why we saw a transition in the 0562 base from Elmax to S35. And I think had this Emerson designed 0620 continued and not been discontinued, which by the way, guys, this is a discontinued knife. I'm sure you're like, you waited till 7 minutes and 20 seconds to tell us this is discontinued. Sorry, most people watching this are going to know this is discontinued. If you're a newcomer and you didn't know that, I'm sorry. I probably should have said that right off the bat. This is a discontinued model. But anyways, I think that's why the transition, we saw that transition from Elmax to S35V, and I'm not sure why exactly. I don't think there was necessarily a problem with Elmax. It might have just been more cost efficient for ZT to transition to S35VN. But anyways, I think S35VN is close enough in composition that it was a justifiable change. Much like 204P and 20CV and M390, they're actually identical in composition, or nearly identical. Anyways, Elmax is a great steel. You check out online, you're going to hear, Elmax is great for folding knives and fixed blades that are designed for, more hard use oriented tasks. So it's perfectly fitting on a knife like this. Definitely. Moving on down to, we already talked about the thumb disc opener, which by the way is in just a perfect place for deploying this knife. Whether you're using the forward flick or you're using the reverse flick, I can kind of show you how my finger's fitting in back there. You can use the meat of your finger, or you can get your fingernail underneath it and flick it out like that, no problem. D10 is kind of sitting medium, but still heavy enough to where you really would have to shake it. I think I can actually get it to shake out. Let's try. Yeah, I can get it to shake out, but I have to swing it pretty hard. You kind of need that type of detent to get this type of action with a knife like that. So I wouldn't call it not light, I'd call it medium. It's tuned about perfect for this knife. You've got that sort of socket head pivot that goes along with the hard use theme, or just the hard use appearance of this knife. I think it's a little bit unnecessary. Like it was on the 0909, and I said it didn't really bother me then. It doesn't, but I think it's just easier to use a Torx bit to adjust a pivot. I don't think you're going to have a socket head or a Torx bit more or less readily available on your person day to day. I don't think it, when we're talking about like convenience of adjusting the pivot, I think it's just as inconvenient to have to adjust it with a Torx head as it is a socket head, given what most people have in their vicinity on a day-to-day basis. But I think when it comes down to it, making the actual adjustment is probably easier with a simple Torx head, which is why we see that on, it's why you don't see this head anymore. It just doesn't make sense. You have some vertical traction lines, I guess, for your fingers when you're holding onto the knife. It adds a little bit of more visual appeal to an otherwise plain peel ply textured front. You know, you'll have to imagine without that, it would just kind of look like this. So that's fine. I love the gigantic button head handle screws on this, and I love the Hinder style standoffs and those on the back. I mean, that size of screw should be on every knife. I mean, like it's big, it's gonna hold in place, and it's easy to get a Torx bit in there and make the adjustment without being concerned with stripping it out. So that's the way it should be. Simple pillar construction. You have the titanium side, and then, excuse me, what I found out is likely a steel liner under the G10 here. That liner is not, you know, I know on XM18s and other knives that are like that, you know, the liner is titanium, but I think probably to keep the cost down, that's steel. Moving on to the other side, we have an Emerson style ZT clip, which I'm not 100% sure whether or not it's modular with, you know, like Benchmade and ProTech clips, a lot like, you know, Emerson's are, or Les George clips. But it does look nice. I like that. I think that's cool. The knife carries about here. So there's a fair, it carries about here. There's a decent amount of the knife sticking up out of your pocket, but not crazy. You do have a lock bar insert on this knife, which doubles as the over travel stop. You can see, despite this knife being a pretty old model, and it looks like it's been used a lot, it's still only locking up at about 45%, maybe 50 at the most. Very solid. No blade play up, down, left, or right. The lock side has a nice tumbled finish to it. It's just kind of a plain tumbled finish. Everything's rounded off nicely. No sharp edges anywhere. You do have that hex female side or non-show side to keep it from spinning, which is great. Should make it easy for disassembly. Just really, really nice all the way around. Let's talk about lockup on this guy. Lockup, up, down, left, and right is solid. Some of you guys may remember a video that surfaced about the time that, you know, people really started to talk about all the lock face geometry issues that ZT has experienced. And, you know, I talked about this in a recent video, and Slicey Dicey has talked about this, and other channels have talked about this. That issue is overblown. You know, just to say the same thing I've been saying this whole time, there are isolated occurrences of that, but it's nowhere near as big of a problem as people are making it out to be. It's not something you guys should be like overly concerned with. Now, there was a video about this knife that surfaced, and it was a guy testing, and you guys can find this for yourself. I'm not going to link it. You can find it and watch it if you want to. It's out there. This guy tests this knife in the most ridiculous and stupid ways you could imagine. Most memorably, he had like a piece of wood. Did he have it like roped up or something? And he just started swinging at it like this, and was like taking chunks out of it. And for the life of me, I could not figure out what on earth he was trying to demonstrate. A lot of you guys are going to remember that, and a lot of you guys are going to rush out to try and find that. But I honestly, as I was watching the video, I thought this is a joke. Like the guy's he's trolling. This can't be real. But it seems like he was serious, you know, and he talks about the spine whack test, and he really, I mean, he turns this thing over. I think this exact knife, turns it over, and there's a flat, you know, wood surface, and he swings that thing down so hard. You watch that video, I don't know of a frame lock in existence that could withstand the force that he put on the back of that blade. Let me demonstrate this. Let me take my ring off. This is, to me, I don't like to do the spine whack test, but for me, this is all the more a knife needs to withstand on the spine in order for me to feel like I'm secure in lockup. See that? I'm not wearing any protective gear right now, right? So if this thing were to disengage, it would come down on my hand. And no, it's not safe. I get that. But I want to demonstrate to you guys, I did this off camera and swung it against my palm, and I was like, nah, that thing's not going anywhere. If it's not going to disengage on my palm, I honestly can't imagine anything that I'm going to do with this knife, you know, that you know, would normally be expected of a folding knife, that would cause it to disengage. Do I think that I could go out on my front porch on the concrete and put work gloves on and swing this thing down with the force of the same force that Thor applies to his hammer. Do I think I could get it to disengage? Well, yeah, probably, but I could get any knife to. I think I might be able to get a triad lock to disengage. In a specific circumstance. If I put the triad lock in a vise and hit the handle with a sledgehammer or the blade, yeah, I could get it to disengage. But at what point? At what point does doing that start to prove less? At what point do you get diminishing returns on that type of test? Bashing the spine of the blade against my palm pretty hard and it's not disengaging, and I wasn't holding the lock bar in there, that's enough for me to be convinced, like, no, it's not going to disengage on this knife. I fully trust I could take this thing out and really beat on it. It feels 100% secure in that lockup. It's not going anywhere. This is 100% rock solid. Absolutely. This is an awesome knife. I'll tell you this. The wave feature on Emerson knives, I have no interest in whatsoever. I know some people like that, and maybe there are some people out there. Maybe soldiers or people, in law enforcement, maybe there is a benefit to using that wave feature. For those of you who don't know, the wave feature, as you draw this knife from your pocket, that wave catches the seam of your pants and causes the blade to deploy as you draw it from your pocket, making it technically I think this is that with knives with that design feature deploy faster than any other system on the planet. What circumstances would benefit from a knife that deploys that quickly? I don't know. I'm not military or law enforcement, and those are the only two types of people I could imagine might benefit from something like that. So for me, a regular person, I have no use for it. You could shave that off, don't care. But it's to me, I look at that and I go, it's an Emerson design. So it's an identifying thing as far as Emerson designs go, and I suppose I appreciate that. I can always pick out an Emerson design, and I think that's branding yourself with a particular feature is important. So I get that. I don't think necessarily, despite that new ZT Emerson with the green carbon fiber that I really like, and it doesn't have that wave feature. A lot of people are like, why doesn't it have the wave? Maybe they should have included it on that, but I don't know. Anyways, mountable positions for the pocket clip, I almost always skip that. You can mount this right hand tip up or left hand tip up, which is great. People who enjoy tip down, sorry, this is a knife that is fine tip down because it doesn't have a flipper tab, but it just doesn't have that option. It is a right-handed frame lock though, so keep that in mind. Nowadays, if you want to pick one of these up, you have to do it on the secondary market. If you want to find one that's in used condition, I don't think they're too bad. They probably run about the same sale price that you see or that you saw when these things went out. I feel like I see them on blade forums used for $140 to $175. Brand new, you want one like this that's mint, secondary market, you're probably going to pay $225 plus, $225 plus. You're probably going to pay a lot more for the upgraded carbon fiber versions or the 0630 versions, mint. But that's just what you're going to pay. If you have an opportunity to pick one up that's used but in good condition, yeah, I'm going to recommend this knife. I don't think it's a knife that people should be paying more than about $175 for on the secondary market. LMAX G10 and titanium, steel lock bar insert, those are all great materials. But again, secondary market prices, if that's where you have to go, I'm going to say $175 in really good condition is about the peak there. But it's definitely a recommendable knife, Also, speaking of recommended knives in my playlists, I decided to make another playlist because constantly I'm, like in the case of the Civivi Wyvern and the Benchmade Bug Out, those both were knives that I didn't really like the feel of, but I could completely understand why other people might like them. And so for that reason, they were still recommendable knives to me, and I still put them on that playlist. But that playlist was titled as Metal Complex's Most Recommended Knives. And I realize there's a difference between knives that I can recommend to people and knives that bring me the most joy personally. So I actually ended up making another playlist of knives that my absolute favorite knives that I have handled or used for any reason. Not necessarily specifically utilitarian reasons, but also for reasons of just pure joy. Like the Medford Praetorian T in S90V, not a practical knife at all, and I can't really give a whole lot of utilitarian justifications for that knife. But is it on that list? Oh yeah, because it's one of my favorite knives that I've ever handled. I just like it. So if you want to check that playlist out, if you want to find out what my absolute favorite knives that I have ever handled are, you can check that out. I think it's got over 50 videos on it. And then separate is still my playlist where, you know, a whole bunch of knives that I can still recommend to people, even if they're not my favorite knives. So I hope that makes sense. But anyways, guys, I think that is pretty much everything that I can say about the 0620. Really cool knife. It's sad that it's gone. I'm glad that I finally got an opportunity to handle it. Just a really, really cool knife. And you know, it kind of, this knife and it being discontinued and other knives of this same hard use caliber being discontinued with zero tolerance kind of marks the end or the seemingly the end of zero tolerance's true, I don't want to say their true hard use line, but just the knives that have that appearance, that aggressive hard use overbuilt appearance. It's kind of like this one kind of died during the decline of those styles. So it's kind of sad, but it's definitely an awesome knife. And like I said, if you get an opportunity to pick one up for a good price, definitely check it out. That is going to be pretty much it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.